Welcome to Dialogues for Change. Life is not a void to be filled. It is a plenitude to be discovered. Today, I would like to share with you some beautiful thoughts by T.N. Madan, taken from his book Pathways, Approaches to the Study of Society in India. And the contribution I would like to share is on anthropology and critical self-awareness, and also on the question of anthropology and intercultural dialogue. Because though it may seem that anthropology is maybe the window in the Western social sciences, which is opening up to other cultures and maybe engages in intercultural dialogue with them, this may not necessarily be the case. Anthropology sat proudly, though briefly, on a wall. The wall erected by the Enlightenment and buttressed by colonialism, viewing the non-Western cultures of the world and their disintegration with the detachment that behoves scientific inquiry. Our generation has had to witness its fall, however, and also the efforts to put it together again. It seems to me that a tragic misunderstanding of the possible scope of anthropology underlies some of these efforts. Thus the project, which is called by such names as native, spontaneous, autonomous, or indigenous anthropology, seems to me to misconstrue the very nature of the discipline. I would therefore like to begin this essay by clarifying what I understand by the term anthropology. There have always been affirmations by the brave among the tribe that anthropology is about that wondrous creature man in whatever place or time we meet him. That is the myth by which they have lived. In practice, however, anthropology has been the effort of certain intellectuals to make sense of non-Western cultures of the world in the manner dictated by Western science. In other words, the basic presuppositions of anthropology is that we are able not only to obtain verifiable information about cultures other than our own through observation, but also to acquire scientific understanding of them. Man and morals are thus treated as objects of scientific study, just as nature and natural forces are. We need do no more here than recall that although the founding fathers of anthropology relied upon their own cultural understandings, glorified by the widespread evolutionist ethos of the second half of the 19th century, to place other cultures in their proper places on the lower rungs of an evolutionary ladder, a later generation admitted of varieties of understanding as well as of culture. It, however, took away with one hand what it gave with the other by promulgating a functional or scientific theory of culture. Neither Malinowski's own well-intended and forthright admonitions about the dangers of ethnocentrism, nor the prodigalities of the culture relativist could really shake the positivist foundations of anthropology. The focus was on verbal and non-verbal behavior as observed from the outside by the trained investigator called the anthropologist. Though the so-called natives did whatever could be done in front of the anthropologist's eyes and said whatever could be spoken within his hearing, the anthropologist took his selected pickings and constructed his own image of the culture and society under observation. In the process, however, two vantage points came to be recognized: the external and the internal. Durkheim had of course already formulated in the 1890s this distinction when he proposed that social facts be studied as things as well as collective representations. But his view suffered at the hands of one-eyed exegetes. The importance of the dual perspective was later to be rediscovered under the reign of linguistics and reformulated as the ethic and emic dimensions of social reality. The important thing, however, is not the recognition of the two vantage points, or of scientific and homemade models, but of the nature and importance of their nexus. It seems to me that we must adhere firmly to the notion that anthropology resides in this nexus, that it is a kind of knowledge, a form of consciousness, which arises from the encounter of cultures in the mind of the anthropologist. what an outsider learns about an alien society's observable modes of behavior will not yield anthropological understanding, unless he is also able to grasp, in the first place, the subjective purposes and meanings that make these modes of behavior significant to the people concerned. But the knowledge about one's own beliefs and rituals, which an informant may impart to the investigator, is not anthropological understanding either. All field workers know that well-informed and intelligent insiders often fail to provide exegetic commentaries on what they are able to narrate. At the same time, the insider's puzzlement about his own situation is hardly ever resolved through reference to other people's ways of life that the anthropologist might acquaint him with. The point, then, is not that anthropology is superior or inferior to the traveler's tale or to autology, howsoever attained, but that it is different from both. Difference should not, however, be interpreted as the mutual irrelevance of the view from within and the view from without. If it is, the nexus I mentioned above becomes redundant and the promise of anthropology remains unrealized. The anthropologist has been by convention an outsider who has tried to understand what the insiders of the society he wants to study believe and do. He seeks to enter another society, as it were, to live intensely in it, enveloped by it, but only for a while. His intention is to leave it and return to his own society. In the words of Claude Lévi-Strauss, every anthropological study seeks to enlarge a specific experience to the dimensions of a more general one, which thereby becomes accessible as experience to men of another country or epoch. A risk which the outsider and the anthropologists run is that of going native and losing his perspective, often erroneously referred to as objectivity. Judging by the available evidence, however, anthropologists have been remarkably successful in overcoming this professional hazard. In view of this, I have elsewhere described anthropological fieldwork as the art of living intimately with strangers. In this sort of work, it is understandable that what is relatively easily accessible through observation from the outside gets more emphasis than what is given in the people's own experience. That what people do gets more attention than what they think or believe in. That what they have is stressed more than what they are. Under the circumstances, positivism comes to be regarded as a virtue, and scientific knowledge, so-called, gets elevated to being considered the only valid understanding. Karl Popper's judgment may appear harsh, but it seems just to me. The triumph of social anthropology is the triumph of a pseudo-observational, pseudo-descriptive, and pseudo-inductive generalizing methodology, and above all marks the triumph of a pretended objectivity, and hence an imitation of the methods of natural science. It is, therefore, all to the good that anthropologists have turned in a big way in recent years to the examination of cultural signs, symbols, and meanings, to structures of inference, implication, and signification. Structuralism and phenomenology, with their respective concerns with form and consciousness, are the intellectual streams which have significantly contributed to this development. It is obvious that unless we put people back into anthropology, we'll only deal with behavior and institutions, and we will deal with them imperfectly. For what people do is never fully comprehensible unless we try to find out what they believe in and what their purposes, values, and norms are. This takes us into the realm of subjective experience, which, needless to emphasize, is hard to penetrate. What people believe in and do, and the relationship between belief and action, have first to be understood in the people's own terms. This is the first order interpretation of facts, before one may translate these understandings into the language of anthropology. The anthropologist's task, then, is to establish a synthesis between the introversion of self-understanding and the extroversion of scientific method. This is a very difficult undertaking. A simple-minded aggregative approach does not lead to such a synthesis, because among other reasons, the two perspectives do not readily merge into a harmonious whole. They cannot, in view of the different presuppositions. This is, perhaps, why Louis Dumont says that duality of attention is here the condition sine qua non of social anthropology. Unless we maintain and combine both views, we shall get adrift. Anthropology then may be defined as the mutual interpretation of cultures, one by the other. Stated differently, anthropology has to choose between intercultural communication on the one hand and cultural exclusivism, whether in the form of ethnocentrism or solipsism on the other. In fact, there is no choice, for the latter option would drastically diminish the scope of anthropology and eventually lead to its abolition. It is, however, important to recognize that anthropology defined as intercultural communication is beset with overwhelming conceptual and methodological problems. Thus, the uncritical use of one particular language to establish such communication will result in understanding which is based on misunderstanding. These problems have to be faced and overcome, for to extend to culture what Goethe said about language, so long as we know no foreign culture, we are in a sense ignorant of our own. These are very, very, very inspiring thoughts on anthropology. Being myself a legal anthropologist, I have been confronted to this issue of a science of the other, which sometimes does not really take the other very seriously. And what T. and Madan wrote in this book decades ago really seems to me quite relevant nowadays. I think that one of the challenges we do have to take up is to introduce the sensitivity of intercultural dialogue inside of our anthropological endeavors, but also more largely in all of our social sciences, law and politics. It may not only allow us to discover other cultures better, new ways, other ways of doing things, of viewing the world, of organizing it, but also give us a better self-understanding of our own culture, of our own ways of doing things. And may allow us in this, it's called era of globalization, maybe to find more dialogical, new solutions to the predicaments we find ourselves in. I hope these thoughts inspired you on this Tuesday, 2nd of July, on this Tuesday, 3rd of July, 2012. Thank you.